Hi, it's Jason Heath for Contra-Based Conversations, and this is a special bonus episode featuring Megan McDevitt, who we had on the podcast. And this is her live talk on bass and gender from the 2018 Golden Gate Bass Camp. This is a topic that Megan has been presenting at various events, including the 2017 International Society of Bassists Convention. And we have links in the show notes if you want to check out the slides that accompany this. Thank you to Megan. Check out her website, again, linked up in the show notes. And without further ado, here's Megan McDevitt from the 2018 Golden Gate Bass Camp on bass and gender.
I studied with Diana Gannett, and that was the first time that I'd had a woman as a bass teacher, and it made me realize that gender was a significant kind of aspect of my experience with the world of bass players. I think I had not totally understood that before. I knew that I was one of few women who were pursuing the bass professionally, but I think it started to really hit me how big of a difference that made. So I started doing some research, and I did just a little bit of research on the world of orchestral playing. So this talk, we're going to focus mostly on the orchestra environment. There's so much you could cover with the bass and gender, because you could talk about jazz, you could talk about solo playing, you could talk about contemporary music, you could talk about rock music, which is interesting because a lot of rock musicians, they think of women, the bass, as being the realm of women, which is kind of interesting for this. So I did a little bit of research. The ISB orchestras are the top full-time kind of orchestras in the country, and I can't remember what it stands for at the moment. International something of Symphony and Opera Musicians, I think, Committee, and this is the top 51 orchestras, and I looked at their bass sections. There are 314 total bassists in these orchestras, and only 26 of them are women. That's 8.3%, if you do the math. So that's extremely low, actually, if you think about how the general population is basically 50-50. And there are even a little bit more women in the world. So I thought that was a pretty shocking number, because sometimes you think about it, you go okay, well, I know professional orchestras, there's usually one or two women, but once you get to the top level, there's a lot of men. And so I made this little chart here where you can see the top orchestras. I did this just the top 20 ranked by pay, so that's the highest paying to the lowest paying. And if you look at Minnesota Orchestra is kind of an anomaly there at number 8, because they have a female principal and associate principal, which is pretty sweet. But if you look at all these other ones, it's mostly men in the principal and associate principal chairs. And if you look at the top 7, so the highest paying orchestras, there's only 2 women in them at all in the bass sections. Okay, so that's pretty alarming. So what I want to talk about is why. There's no one answer, so we're just going to kind of dive into a few reasons. And to do that, we have to sort of talk about society as a whole and not just the world of bass, because we're not, I was just saying to Jason this morning, we're not in a vacuum as bass players, right? We live in this world. So, and it's interesting, the numbers are alarming, but, it's not just about the numbers. It's about, what do the numbers mean? What does it say? Why aren't there more than a few women in there? And, I was having a talk with somebody about it, and he was like, well, what would mean it was equal? Like, what would the percentage have to be to say, like, oh, this is equality now? And I don't think that there is an answer to that. Like, I think the numbers, like, we really need to dig into, like, what they indicate and not just, oh, well, if the numbers are there, then everything's fine, you know? So it's a big discrepancy, so it's worth investigating. So the reason I'm doing this talk is basically to say, like, there's a problem here, right? There are reasons for it, and we should be aware of those reasons so that we can change it. Okay, so we're going to discuss how pervasive is the influence of gender. Very. Some helpful academic framework and terms that I've learned that's helped me kind of understand this a little bit. I'm going to introduce you to some of those. Then we're going to talk about music education, kind of close to the chest for all of you music students. And then in career. And we'll just kind of, maybe we can have a little discussion if anyone wants to share or has any thoughts about what we can do. Okay, and I just want to say, women don't all have the same experience. There are lots of different women of different backgrounds, of all kinds, you know, race, ethnicity. We'll get to, like, all the sort of categories that you can identify as, or that you're sort of forced to identify yourself as, in a minute. But I don't speak for all women. Just want to say that right off the bat. Okay. So this is a graphic. Oh, you don't have all the colors on the. That's weird. Looks like this on my. Anyway. Oops. You guys all heard the term intersectionality? Never heard it. It's okay. It's a term that is used kind of a lot nowadays. I see it a lot on social media. It started in academia. It's a woman named Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989. She's a queer black woman, and wanted to talk about the different ways her different identities intersected each other, and sort of, rather than thinking of it as like an additive burden of inequality, it was sort of like understanding the different ways that discrimination or privilege happen based on different identities. So these are just a few: racial identity, sexuality, gender, disability or ability, nationality, a couple other ones, religion, region, whether you're an immigrant or have immigrant parents, trans identity, and then face. That's another one. It looks cooler when you can see all the colors. But so the base is sort of part of our identity now. So here's the actual definition of intersectionality: the complex, cumulative way in which the effects of multiple forms of discrimination, such as racism, sexism, and classism, combine, overlap, or intersect, especially in the experiences of marginalized individuals or groups, which is sort of what I just kind of explained. And this just says discrimination, but privilege also. All right. So this is just a small snapshot. You know, the intersectionality can get sort of overwhelming. You start trying to include everything in one talk, you're not really talking about anything anymore. So we're going to just stick to gender and the base today. And to do that, I wanted to break down something I learned in my sociology studies at the University of Michigan. This was a really helpful tool to break down an understanding of gender into these three structures. Or dimensions. So there's individual, interactional, and institutional. And this is a way of showing how gender is everywhere in what we do, right? You can't actually separate a person from their gender or their gender identity. So I'll just go ahead and read this. Individual is how we view our own gender as part of our identity. Like you say, I'm just being me. But you are influenced by the expectations of your gender, and how you feel about yourself is often, like maybe you like to wear dresses and that's an influence of your gender, or maybe you like G.I. Joe and that's influenced by your gender, you did like playing with those toys when you were younger. Your food preferences, your activity preferences, whether or not you wear makeup, or like all of these things that you think of as very individual and are very individual are also very influenced by your gender. The other one is interactional, the second one. So how our gender dictates the way we interact with others and portray ourselves in various social settings. So being the pursuer in a heterosexual dating situation, or helping in the kitchen at Thanksgiving, those are some examples of the way we interact based on our gender. There's a lot of research that's been done that shows that men tend to interrupt women more often than other men, or women interrupt each other. And, we could talk for days about why that might be, but the way you interact with people is going to be different. So based on whether or not that person is the same gender as you or a different gender. By the way, not everybody falls into clear categories of gender, but we'll talk about that in a minute. And then institutional. All of these things are institutionalized. So how gender is embedded in our most important social institutions. So family hierarchies, public bathrooms, military draft, those are sort of some clear ways institutions are gendered. Other ones, school dress codes, or orchestra dress codes even. So a couple of examples of institutions if you're not familiar. Government, law, family, religion, media, medicine, the military, education, and orchestras are institutions, right? So these institutions are historically developed by men, dominated by men, and culturally and symbolically interpreted from the standpoint of men. Meaning, books written about institutions or people tended for a long time to be written by men. And yet, we see these institutions as gender neutral. Okay, so that was kind of a mind-blowing concept for me to come across. Is like these institutions are not gender neutral, even though we think of them as gender neutral. They are run by men. And things are changing, but it's hard to change something that was founded and for many years sustained by people made up of one gender, the dominant gender, and just like turn it around, right? So, all right, so I've been using the term gender kind of loosely, so here are some more definitions. We're going to get through the academic stuff, and we'll talk about music. But, so breaking down, have you guys heard of the distinction between sex and gender before? Some of you have. So, sex is basically your biologically based assignment using criteria that's been socially agreed upon to determine a person's membership in one of two groups, male or female. And those criteria are basically your genitalia and your chromosomes, right, your genes. So, and there are people that are born called intersex who don't necessarily have a clear sex category, and they're always put in one or the other. So then sex categories. So this is like Weston Zimmerman are some of the some prominent sociologists to talk about gender, and they came up with these categories. So sex category, as distinct from sex, is once you're assigned a sex, in everyday life we use like socially required identificatory displays to show others to which group we belong. So without, you're not like taking your pants off, hopefully in front of people all the time. So, but people know what sex category you belong to because of many reasons, including the way you dress or the way your body looks. So people guess what your sex is, basically, and that's your sex category. And then gender, according to West and Zimmerman, is an accomplishment or a series of performances requiring social interaction in order to achieve socially constructed norms of behavior expected from one sex category. So that's basically, their idea is gender is something you do. So you're constantly performing your gender through your actions and interactions and the way you participate in society. Okay, any questions about that? Can be a little bit confusing, I think. Okay, great. Oh yeah, right. So this is another sort of an institutional definition of gender. It's an institutionalized system of social practices for constituting people as two significantly different categories and organizing social relations of inequality on the basis of that difference. So basically, the difference leads to inequality. Creating these two main categories can lead to one being dominant over the other. It's sort of essential to it. Okay, so we're going to do something more fun now. See people nodding off. Okay. I'll just use this side of the board and that side of the board. So I want you to think about what you think society's ideals of masculinity are. So if somebody's a person and they're the most masculine person, what do you think our society values in that person? Go ahead and yell things out. Strength. It's always the first one. Looks. Good looks.
Maybe.
Leadership, yeah. Confidence, yeah. Bravery, that's good. Anything else? I'm going to just add these because we don't necessarily think that on the surface, but that's sort of part of this sort of idealization thing. Anything else? I think I got smells bad one time, or it's okay to smell bad. Okay, let's see. What do I have on mine? Let's see. What about loud? Or what about money? Do they have money? Wealthy? I guess sort of confident and leadership can make people loud. What about their brains? Are they smart? Are they stupid? Anything else? Maybe outgoing?
Extrovert.
What'd you say?
Extrovert.
Extroverted, exactly. I don't know how to spell it. What is it?
How they dress.
How they dress. How do they dress? No, that's great. That's great. What do you think? Like,
T-shirts.
well-dressed t-shirts? Maybe like a nice t-shirt? Well-dressed. Is that what you meant? Well-dressed or like casually dressed or whatever? Okay. Anything else? Are you like big or small or tall or short? Big and tall. Okay, so that's a pretty good smattering. So let's do feminine now.
Smart.
Go over here. Oh, smart. Nice. I loved it. That's the first one he said. That's soft. That's good.
Outspoken. No,
So yeah, we're thinking of like societal ideals of what a good feminine. So not necessarily what you personally think is good, which I love that those are like the first things you came up with. We're smart and outspoken. That's wonderful and beautiful. We're thinking about like what society as a whole thinks of as an ideal feminine person. Kind?
Tiny.
Oh, tiny?
And kind.
Tiny. Kind.
Makeup.
Sorry?
Makeup.
Makeup? They wear makeup? Shopping? They like shopping? Yeah. Talking?
Yeah.
Like they talk too much? Or they, yeah. So it's not necessarily an ideal, so maybe not talking too much is the ideal, but they do it anyway. Right?
Meek. Quiet.
Meek, quiet. Shouldn't.
Followers.
Followers.
Maybe they wear dresses.
Dresses, yeah. Dresses. Simple skirts. Anything else? Let's see. I'm also going to add white and heterosexual because that's within our societal ideals too. In America.
Like pink.
Like pink. Yeah. Good. What about money? Doesn't matter, right? Okay, money doesn't matter. Anything else? Okay. Cool. Interesting. We have mostly girls in here. When we were talking about the masculine traits, people were kind of like, I don't know, maybe this, maybe that. But the feminine ones, people were just like rattling them off. Okay, so interesting. All right, so this leads us to another definition that we've got here. Hegemonic masculinity versus hegemonic femininity. So hegemonic masculinity are qualities defined as manly that establish and legitimate the hierarchical and complementary relationship to hegemonic femininity. Okay, so that's basically all of these qualities that we listed that work into this definition. And hegemonic femininity are qualities defined as womanly that establish and legitimate the hierarchical and complementary relationship to hegemonic masculinity, that by doing so guarantee the dominant position of men and the subordination of women. So there are many ways to be masculine or feminine, but these kind of idealized masculine traits create this hierarchy, right? Because if you look at these two sides, and you're talking about a job, which side do you usually go for? Like, okay, we can kind of connect these, right? So I would say like strong and soft are kind of connected, like good looks or well-dressed, dresses and skirts, big and tall versus tiny. Let's see, confidence and bravery versus meek and quiet, right? Let's see, can we connect more of these? Money doesn't matter to wealthy. I like smart, but yeah, white and heterosexual connect to each other. Extroverted and sort of followers are sort of opposites, right? So we have these sort of dichotomies, right? Meaning like two opposites. And when you think about like when someone wants to hire someone to do a job, are they going to be more on this side or more on this side in terms of traits? Yeah. Right, so that creates problems for everybody. It creates problems for women because there's something called the tightrope, which is basically, you remember when I said that gender was something you do? So doing your gender, you have to choose between doing your gender and doing your job well, right? That's the tightrope we're walking. Is like if you go too far to one side or the other side, you're either like not confident enough or you're not feminine enough. So you're kind of doing this little tightrope walk. And for men, it's a problem. How do you think it's a problem for men? What if you're a small man?
Bullied.
Or, yeah, you could get bullied, right? What if, what if you're not white or not heterosexual, or you're not a good leader, or you don't dress well? Maybe the well-dressed thing you could get away with. But, it's hard for everybody to live up to those. Women can basically never do it. Or else they're sort of categorized in a certain way. And men can't really ever do it because nobody can live up to these ideals. So it's really kind of a problem that everybody has. Also, it can create this situation that we have where men feel the need to assert power in various ways, right? Including over women's bodies. Okay. Now that I've thoroughly depressed you, let's talk about choosing an instrument. I thought this picture was so cute. Okay. So, do you guys think instruments are masculine or feminine?
No.
Yeah. Kind of. No? Yes? Okay, what are some instruments that are masculine?
I don't think there's
Bass,
any.
yeah, okay. Good
I
one.
don't think
Good start.
there's any.
Maybe not
Trumpet.
essentially, but how do we think about it? Right. Trumpet. Can you say more about you don't think there's any?
Well, like, anyone can play an instrument that they like. They don't. it doesn't really fit into a category masculine or feminine.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Instruments themselves are not gendered. They're things. You know? And yet we have, and some of you guys are really young, so, you know, maybe you haven't experienced this much. And you guys, all of the students in here right now are women or young ladies. So maybe you all chose to play the bass and you're here. So that's pretty amazing. So maybe you haven't been exposed as much to these kind of gender dynamics in the instrument world, and I feel like maybe I'm scarring you now, but we'll get through it. Don't worry. So, any other instruments that are masculine? Tuba. Drums. It's kind of the loud instruments, right?
Yeah.
The loud instruments and the low instruments and the big instruments.
Yeah.
Right? What about feminine instruments? Violin. Flute. Anything else? Okay, I mean, that's good. We can go and piccolo, whatever. Smaller and a little bit daintier, I guess, instruments. So this can sort of play out in different ways when kids are choosing an instrument initially. I'd love to, if we have a couple minutes at the end, love to hear how you guys ended up playing bass. But so kids who see musicians of their own gender playing an instrument are significantly more likely to express curiosity about that instrument. So with these with sort of outreach concerts and stuff, if you have a woman playing bass, then the girls are more likely to think, oh, I could play bass, than if they see a man. And it's the same for boys too, seeing a man playing an instrument. They're more likely to choose it too. So in terms of individuals, you might think, like, for kids when they're choosing instruments, they might think, oh, like, I like to sound pretty or something, so I'm going to play the flute. So they think, like, oh, this is about me, but their gender is influencing their decision, right? And then there's the interactional aspect of it, right? So, like, my friends are doing this. Like, all my friends are girls, and they're all playing violin or something, so I want to do that too. Something to that degree. And then institutionally, there are textbooks that show different people playing different instruments. And when you look at the pictures of who's playing what instruments, they're really gender conforming. So it's always a woman playing the flute, always a man playing the trombone, stuff like that. So that's the way that it's sort of institutionalized. So people see this and it affects them and their instrument choice. Okay. So we kind of already did this, but how's the bass masculine? So, we didn't really get to it. So I put these instruments here under the masculine category, and we said that it's because they're big or low or loud or some combination of that. So do you think that it takes some of these traits to play those instruments?
Not really.
Not really.
Yeah.
Not actually, no. But sometimes we think about, like, strength and leadership and confidence as things that are really important in, like, winning an audition on the bass or something like that. And this is so interesting. You guys, this group, I've done this talk, I think it's my 4th time doing it, and you guys are so much more defiant than it. You're like, no, that's not true. That's not how it works. And it's great because you guys are the younger people, and you're not already sort of jaded by society. You're changing society into, like, the next phase, and it's pretty amazing. Okay. So let's move on. because we only don't have that much time. So transitioning from student to professional. So since there are more young women playing bass and studying music in school, like you guys, but the top echelon of professionals is overwhelmingly men, as we saw in the numbers at the beginning, right? So 8.3% in orchestras, in top orchestras. So what's going on? We already talked about the idea of, wait, I totally lost my train of thought. Whatever, I was gone. So, yeah, so there's this engineering experiment that was done, because in the world of engineering, they have similar issues to the bass world, right? It's like men, it's predominantly men, and women are kind of trying to break in. And they also were seeing a huge drop-off between graduate school and the professional world. So women were maybe not just as likely, but there were plenty of women who were getting to the top levels in school and then deciding to switch careers after, or to leave the field. And one experiment that they tried was mentors of different genders. So like within this group, some women in these graduate school programs were not given a mentor to work with. Some were given male mentors, and some were given women as mentors. And what they found was the women that had no mentor were the least likely to stay in a career. They were more likely to abandon the career path. The women with the male mentors were like kind of 50-50. And the women who had other women as their mentors were the most likely to stay in their field. So what they found is sort of not just seeing yourself, like even with the kids, like I was saying, you see this person playing bass who's the same gender as you, and you think like, oh, maybe I can do that too. It carries over into these higher levels, right? If you don't see yourself there, you're less likely to think of yourself as part of the group. And so, yeah, so not just that, but then you're involved with this person who is like helping you, like guiding you, giving you support and confidence, and who you also see yourself in, and they're fostering connections for you too. And you're basically like supported in a way that makes you feel like you belong in this profession, and you don't lose confidence in yourself. Okay. Okay, so does anyone want to share any experience with a mentor or anything at the moment, or have any questions about what you've learned so far? Okay, cool. That's fine. Okay, so we're talking about blind auditions, because that is one wonderful thing we have in the world of orchestral playing, is blind auditions. So, do you guys know about blind auditions? So when you're playing for an orchestra audition, some of you did nod. So basically, the committee, whoever's in the orchestra and deciding to hear auditions, is behind a big screen. So they can't see you, you can't see them, they don't know who you are. And the point of this is to avoid bias, and so it's called a bias interrupter. So if institutions or people are noticing biases, they can do something to prevent their subconscious from having an effect on their decision, right? So one thing that happened, as you can see on the board, is that once blind auditions started happening, once the screen went up, women were 50% more likely to be hired in orchestra. which is an amazing number, and it also shows how big of a bias that played beforehand. So, St. Louis Symphony actually last year became more than 50% women, which is really exciting. They used to only have 2 bass players who are women, which is the most of any of the orchestras on the list. Nobody had more than 2 on the whole 52 orchestra list. Other factors that can contribute to blind auditions not leading to equality are bias in pre-screening. So sometimes you have to send a resume before you go audition for somewhere. So that's a pre-screening. So there could be bias, like name bias there. No hires leading to appointments. That's like, I don't know if some of you were in Dan's talk the other day. When a committee can't decide on somebody, they don't hire anybody. And that can happen enough times that they end up just appointing someone. So that kind of defeats the purpose. Inconsistency of the screen. Sometimes orchestras take the screen down for the last round. So that can lead to bias. And then there's other factors too, like support work, which is something that women tend to do, but everybody does to some degree. In conversation, it's like asking all the questions of the other person. How was your weekend? How are you doing? Like, sort of going, yeah, and like active listening. That tends to be something that women do more than men. So, and household labor. So these things can kind of get in the way of your practice time, right? If a woman, women tend to be more likely to take on more of the household labor. So if living with a partner and you're auditioning for orchestras, you might be more likely to be the one making dinner or doing the dishes, and it's less acceptable for you to just go off and take time on your own to practice. So these are some possible factors here too. Once you're in the job, I'm just really realizing how depressing this is for everybody. You have to contend with sexual harassment, discrimination, family and parental leave options, male-dominated bass section exclusiveness. That's this kind of like bro-y culture of the bass section, and microaggressions. Do you guys know what microaggressions are? No? Do you want to maybe give her a quick explanation?
So we had to talk about this at school. I don't know if I really remember, but it's like slight things that you do that maybe you don't intend to do that are biased. Like, I don't know any examples, but maybe like if you're new and you're gonna ask someone if they want to go to lunch, maybe you'd ask, like, if you're a dude, you'd ask another guy, even though you don't realize that you're doing that gender bias.
Oh, like being exclusive. Yeah, totally.
Know, like, an example, but it's like little things that.
Yeah, or saying things like, "Oh, you play well for a girl," or something like that. Like little things that, like, by themselves are not necessarily like horrible, but they kind of add up. Someone compared them to mosquito bites one time. So you get one mosquito bite, and it's like, okay, it's fine, whatever. You know, it's a little itchy, whatever. But if you have mosquito bites all over your body, you're going to be very uncomfortable. So microaggressions are like these little sort of subtle things that can add up over time and make you feel kind of defeated. Okay, so maybe we can just have a discussion since there aren't that many of us. What do you think we can do about this? Anybody have any ideas? Because we are doing stuff about it right now. Do you guys know about the whole Me Too movement? Is this something that's on your radar? Have you heard of this? Basically women speaking out against sexual harassment. But it's sort of led to this bigger understanding as a whole in society of how we've been kind of treating women unfairly, and how we've kind of accepted it for a long time. And it's really heartening to see that people are starting to say, like, we're not we're not accepting this anymore. We're not accepting the shame of this. We're gonna start telling our stories. And the more people did it, the more, I think a lot of men in particular didn't realize how big of a problem it was. And now they are starting to realize it. So I think we're seeing a big change in society, and I really hope that it continues. So what my biggest advice to you as young women students is to seek out a teacher. If you want to pursue bass, or in whatever you pursue, like, seek out somebody who you feel really comfortable with as a teacher. It doesn't have to be a woman, but being a woman can be helpful. Studying with a woman can be helpful, as I learned. But studying with a man who takes your unique perspective seriously is really important. So if you are talking to a teacher, and you don't have to be necessarily directly open about it, but really take stock of how you feel around them. Okay, do you feel comfortable being who you are with that person? Okay, because it's a close relationship that you're gonna have for years, right? And one-on-one. And it's not just about bass playing, right? It's about building your confidence and your support for the future, in your future career. Okay? Anyone want to ask anything or share anything? No? I'll give you a little list of stuff we can do. So, encouraging girls. If you know younger ladies who maybe want to play bass and you love it, encourage them to play bass, even if they're thinking oh, maybe that's a boy thing. Although around here it's so many ladies. That's great. And this is stuff you can think about later. Consistent use of screen, improving family leave. And those are some references, but you can find these on my website. Maybe we take, is that clock right? Can we take literally 1 minute? I'm going to start a timer. Maybe just turn to the person next to you. Maybe you guys can, or you can find the person. And I want to do this exercise where, okay, so we're gonna take literally 2 minutes. The first minute, choose one person to talk and the other person only listens. And then the second minute, the other person talks and the first person just listens. And just talk about, it can be a response to what you learned or some of your experience, whatever. So I'm going to set a timer. Hang on. Okay, go.
No, you go. I see it.
Yeah, one of my friends, his name's Jacob. He has this idea about how we're and is telling his best friends us that you should be something really bad. So then we fall back, but we still instrument. So we just sort of hold a grudge and then get to still not realizing that. So just saying these things and then that nobody in this thing. So
Do you play any other instruments?
Yeah, no, this is society. Because it's a very because I thought it'd be different from all the other instruments. It's really big and loud, that stuff.
Okay, switch.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying.
I think
Listening is thinking back. I was about, because I never played instruments in high school. I was too calm. And when the teacher suggested, I was really reluctant because I'm not strong enough for that. I tried, I can't play bass. And then I started, and I realized, oh yeah, there's like just now
The base, I chose the base because mainly it's more muscle.
and very high.
And listen to each other.
Yeah.
And then in college,
like definitely choose the base.
I think like
There's really strong
they had like
nourishment.
people come in
Since
and then
those
and then I heard a guy
oh,
course and I was like, this is so successful.
that shouldn't be a society.
Yeah.
I think there's a big thing that like especially like our generation working towards is like teaching our kids against gender biases.
Right. You can finish up your sentence.
Because I will and he's like, oh, that's a girl talk. I can't do that. You can tell like I'm very gender biased. But I don't.
I want to try others.
I'm very excited for someone to reach this place. I know. I'm like, God, like,
Well, the base is the only
yeah.
so
It
doesn't make me fall asleep.
fighting.
So anyone want to share any thoughts that they just discussed?
As fast as
Yeah.
as fast,
At
like
school, there's a lot more guy bass players than us, and it kind of makes us feel out of place
Yeah.
a little bit. Because, like, there's, like, bigger, and I don't know, it's just, they all
Yeah.
clicked. Because they're thinner.
I think the girls is better than guys.
The girls are better
Maybe news.
at your school?
in my school there are more bass players that are girls than guys.
Yeah. That's cool.
What?
Your face friends.
It was like that when I was younger too.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
not much bass players.
What'd you guys talk about?
What did we talk about?
We mentioned one of our role models, and also one of the basis super cool role models is Orrin O'Brien,
Orrin O'Brien, yeah.
who sort of, without really having at the present time thought about it, really broke down a lot of barriers for women in seeking to get jobs. We were also talking about the sample. It was interesting you were focusing mostly on orchestral stuff, but it seems like a lot of that stuff is true for other genres, but maybe has different disparities.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to learn more about that kind of stuff too. The thing about orchestras is it's easier to measure because
Yes.
it's like specific
Good
jobs.
stats on that.
Because you got good stats with the orchestras. But yeah, I've been hearing a lot of people have been emailing me or talking to me about the jazz world too, and how much discrimination there is against women, but how it's starting to change, and I hope that especially you guys go off and change things because you do belong in the bass world, even though you maybe feel out of place at your school. You're not. Just want to hit that point home. Any other final thoughts before we have to move on to the next thing? Anna? Oh, I bet you were like, me.
Well, okay. How often do you run into things like this? Like on a daily basis?
Often. Mostly it's like random people on the street making comments. Yeah, you know about this probably. Like holding your bass and like, that's bigger than you, or like, some kind of like sort of gendered remark about how ridiculous it is that you would decide to play that or try to help you with it. You're like, I play this instrument, like I can carry it, don't touch it. Those kinds of little things that like are, they sort of add up. And there can be a kind of, that sort of like bro-y culture that I brought up is still happening in professional bass sections. But part of like doing this talk and a lot of what other people are trying to do in the bass world too is like bring attention to it so that not just women but men are also paying attention to it. And trying to change it. So, and I think it'll be different. I hope it'll be different by the time you're playing professionally. Do you guys feel better or worse after this job about the state of women? I know, right? Enlightened. Okay, I like that. That's good. All right, well, thank you for coming.
Thanks, Megan, for letting us put this out there, and it'll be great to hear you talk more about the topic and other topics in the future. Folks, check out Megan's interview that she and I did. If you haven't yet, it's about this topic, and we dig into all sorts of causes and trends and what's happening in terms of base and gender. So very important conversation, I think, both today and in the conversation I had with Megan. Contra-Base Conversations is produced by Michael Cooper, Steve Hinchy, Trevor Jones, and Mitch Mooring. Mitch makes beautiful bases in the Dallas area, just east of Dallas. Check him out at mitchmooring.com. Thank you also to Krista Copper for going through and cataloging and archiving these episodes so that we can do follow-up, bonus, highlight, best of episodes. I'm your host, Jason Heath, coming to you each and every week from San Francisco, California, and we'll see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.